So in Colombia, you have some of these producers that are well-off families and they've set up wonderful farms. And it's not that hard for them because they have the resources, they have the education, they have the background. But then you have a group of traditional farmers and farmer families that have really just innovated on their own and experiment. And at our company, we basically partner with just this style of producers. Hi, I'm Juan Campos, founder of Lohas Beans. I'm very happy to be here on the show today. We're going to be talking about what Lohas Beans is doing in profile development, fermentations, coffee processing techniques, innovation, and we're going to be talking about our line of competition coffees. What we're going to keep finding is new varietals, and therefore continue to expand that range of flavors. And I think that we're going to be able to direct the different profiles towards preferences and then really have a much more educated and calibrated conversation with markets and customers on what we want.
Welcome back, guys. I am your co-host, Rowan Cook. I make coffee on the internet.
And I'm Ben Bicknell. I judge people who make coffee, but only at competitions.
And together we are It's Just Coffee, the coffee podcast for people who know it's never just coffee.
It's true. Ron, when I started drinking coffee for the first time, I thought it kind of just tasted like coffee, right? The main difference was, did it have any milk in it? Maybe a cheeky little bit of chocolate powder in there.
Yeah, but do you remember when you first had a coffee that kind of changed your perception and you could realize that there were other flavors?
Yeah, I reckon there were two key points, actually. The first was when I tasted freshly roasted coffee. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's acidity to this. It's like bright, it's clean, it's not ashy. But the second was probably the iconic thing that I think a lot of people had, which was an Ethiopian natural processed coffee.
Yeah.
And suddenly blueberries. And I was going, what? Coffee can taste like fruit?
Yeah. I think mine was the exact same one. I think I've told that story in the pod where it's like I had that Ethiopian, you're like, oh, I'm getting blueberries and fruit and like, this is crazy interesting. But I mean, that was probably for me like 15 to 20 years ago or something like that. And it made me think about kids these days, they're getting into specialty coffee. And I'm wondering like, are they going on the same journey or are they having, these new processed coffees with all these different methods and going, oh, wow, I didn't know that coffee could taste like grape Hubba Bubba or like a red jelly frog lolly.
Yeah.
And just wondering whether that experience has been completely different for them.
Yeah, well, same feeling, I guess, but just, a wildly range of different flavors they can come across.
And some of those coffees are like El Diviso, the Zaza, Los Flores. Those are the kind of coffees that I'm talking about. Now, you're a World Barista Championship judge.
Yes.
Can you tell me from those coffees that I just listed, what do they all have in common?
Ooh, all freaking delicious.
Yeah.
I have tasted them all, which is delicious. And they were all used by World Barista Champions to win at the World Barista Championship.
Okay, well, I guess it's a trick question because that is correct.
Yes.
But what I actually was going to say, the connection is they're all produced by Lohas Beans.
Ah.
And Lohas Beans actually works with some of Colombia's most innovative coffee producers.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They are a powerhouse and increasingly we're getting to taste some incredible coffees from them. And when you taste some of these coffees, it's like you were describing. It's this explosion of flavors that you just never expected could be in a cup of coffee. So we thought we need to find out more. And thankfully today we have joining us Juan Pablo from Lohas Beans in Bogota, Colombia. Thank you so much for coming on the show and joining us to talk about flavor.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to have a quick word from one of our sponsors, Apex Lab. Elevate your coffee experience with Apex Lab mineral concentrates. Apex Lab's precision-engineered formulas, including tonic, jam, and lilac, are designed to enhance the coffee's natural flavors. Not going to change it, it's just going to enhance it. It's going to bring out the vibrant acidity, the rich sweetness, or if you use lilac, it might bring out those delicate floral notes that you've been looking for. Trusted by world-class cafes and even barista champions, Apex Lab helps you unlock your coffee's full potential. Discover more at apexlab.com. Wait, where was that again, Sonam?
The internet.
Oh, okay. Thought I was going to say the website. Thanks.
We put so much effort into our espresso, dosing, distributing, tamping, weighing, but then in so many cases, a cafe will just take whatever milk they happen to have available and throw it in and call it a day.
I know, and milk actually makes up 70% of all coffees ordered. So you could argue that great milk is just as important as great coffee.
Definitely could argue that.
Oh, I couldn't, I did.
Our great sponsors of the podcast, Riverina Fresh, have a milk that is made for coffee specifically, and it's used by some of the best cafes around the country and, in fact, World Barista Champion.
Yeah, this gold range that they actually have here was designed alongside a World Barista Champion to be richer and more indulgent to pair perfectly with coffee.
If you want to check it out, they are doing a sweet deal for Australian-based cafes, and you can get a free trial.
That's exactly right. You can get a free trial straight to your door. Just head to riverinafresh.com.au and see if your cafe is eligible. And why wouldn't you? Serve up the same milk as World Barista Champions. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsors at Eco Barista. The reason I sound like this is because they got massages at our stand at Mice, and so I'm getting a massage while recording this message for you. They're the best sponsor of the pod that we could have had. They have the best eco products. This probably sounds really pornographic, but it's not. I'm just getting a massage. They have the best eco-friendly coffee products. They got coffee bags that you can design yourself. They got cups, they got iced coffee cups. They got everything you need. So make sure to support them because they support us. Head to ecobarista.com.au and get 15% off your first purchase when you sign up. Oh, mama, that's good.
Thank you, Roland. Thank you, Ben, for having me. It's a pleasure. It's an honor.
Oh, well, we're very excited to have you here and joining the podcast. We're actually sitting here drinking. We thought we'd start off the show by drinking one of your coffees in our cup here.
Yeah, what do we drink? Because you were just talking about flavor bombs and we just had this and straight away you were just like, it took you to like Turkish Delight covered in chocolate, like milk chocolate. I was kind of going to like a Cadbury fruit block kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's spectacular. Cheers to you and the team there, Juan. It's delicious.
What is this one? It's the Java Duo Cherry Velvet Hydra Honey.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into this with one, but this is the Java variety, a Duo Cherry and Hydro Honey processing method. So a lot of words. Hydro Honey. So a lot of words there. We need to figure out what they mean. But let's get into it.
One, I remember the first time someone handed me a competition coffee or one of those kind of wild ones. I was actually here with Anthony Douglas and we were having a coffee and I'm just like, oh my God, it took me to like boysenberry choc top ice cream kind of vibes when we were having it and my, brain kind of melted. And of course, produced by Lohas Beans after we, find out and have that. And that kind of moment started reshaping how you started looking at coffee and how things were. My question is, when did Lohas Beans begin this journey into scientific controlled processing? What was the spark?
Well, it actually started right around Anthony, and I have to give a lot of credit to Anthony because he was the first that I think took this coffee to the world stage, and obviously gave us a lot of visibility among competitors. And we had been working 3 years prior to that in developing the coffee. So I've known Joan Vergara out of the three farms and producers that you mentioned before, El Diviso, Las Flores, and Zarza being Nestor and Adrián Lasso, Zarza being Jonathan Gasca, and Las Flores being Joan Vergara. Out of those, three producers or group of producers, I first encountered Joan back 8 years in time and started buying his Pink Bourbon, which was very emblematic and which was very, very exotic at the time. And I started really getting closer to him and seeing what they were starting to discover in terms of processing techniques. But it was really Anthony, the first competitor that gave the spotlight to these coffees and that allowed us to really start opening a space within the competition scene. So what really sparked it was me finding these producers and seeing how committed they were to innovating, finding new processing techniques with not a lot of tools, just a lot of curiosity, a lot of sense, and a lot of commitment to experimenting and not having the fear of experimenting. And it really took me in the company to focus in working with these specific producers. So it was a huge turning point for the company because I had been working prior to that for the past 10 years in basically making Lohas Beans the largest and main exporter of organic certified coffees out of Colombia. And I had traveled throughout all of Colombia, certifying small scale producer associations and really trying to build a name as the most respected organic certified coffee exporter. And it really took me completely out of that focus because I was frustrated competing with the large multinationals that kept, pressing down the margins and the differentials on certified coffees. And it was really me trying to find the value in the coffee chain. It was really a pursuit of finding value in coffee that led me to particularly Johan Vergara, and then from Johan starting to interact with the Lasso brothers and Jonathan Gasca.
Amazing. I mean, the journey of that, I've been lucky enough to judge at the World Barista Championships, and you're served out coffees and you know that every part of that process has been addressed with an incredible amount of skill and intention, right? There's such precision there. And in the best cases, all of that comes out in the cup. Sometimes it doesn't, you know that there's a lot of good intention, but it doesn't land in the cup. But when it does happen in the cup, that doesn't occur overnight either. How did you and the team build up your skills and your knowledge on microbiology and the systems that you work on at Lohas?
So it's been layers. It started in a very, I think, rudimentary, craftsman-like way. And it was started really by Johan Vergara and Nestor Lasso initially after they finished their technical training course at the SENA Institute, which is a government-run institution in Colombia that has a branch in Pitalito and that has really well crafted technical training courses on production at the field, on processing, and then from there on also on roasting and barista training. And they took the module of the coffee processing part of the training program, and they had graduated from this course and started experimenting at the farm. So it started in a very, again, rudimentary way, just trial and error, small batches, really just, using up coffee and assuming the risk that they were not going to sell that coffee anywhere because at that point in time, anything that was fruity, it was absolutely rejected by any large buyer of a multinational or a cooperative in Colombia. And it was not allowed to be exported by Alma Cafe on any Colombian port. It was rejected as a defect. So it was really a lot of risk-taking initially, trial and error, experimenting. And then I started getting these samples from Johan and really seeing, these very different profiles. And so, we got close. They initially worked with someone locally that had a microbiology background and started understanding the role of microorganisms. I think Nestor Lasso has been extremely diligent and very, academic in his approach in comparing, different processing techniques from other food products. And really building a parallel with coffee and trying to understand why is it that, some processing techniques in some food products that even we have access here to, not necessarily going all the way out to Asian cultures and fermentations in Asian cultures, but really here in Colombia, milk processing, beer processing, all these other, food products that we regularly consume and how they are processed and really just building a parallel. I mean, why is it that in coffee we discard all these microorganisms that are present in the cherry in the process, and why the Colombia Federation that has done great things for this country and for coffee processing also limited the scope of innovation and the scope of looking at coffee in a very wide, very open, and very innovative way. And it kind of capped that mentality and taught producers in just doing a standard washed coffee, get rid of the mucilage. They even developed this, equipment that gets rid of the mucilage, and you don't want any of that in the cup. So how these guys dare to start understanding what microorganisms were present in the farms, and what was the role in fermentation. And then we started bringing people from the outside, first to Pitalito, to give us an understanding of what was happening. But again, at that stage, and that's why I say this has been layer upon layer of understanding, experimenting, and then learning. And it has obviously, made all of us spend the time, spend the resources in trying to understand and getting us trained in how microorganisms are working in different environments, whether it's aerobic, anaerobic, submerged anaerobic, then what is the role of thermal shocks, temperature, and just really experimenting layer upon layer. So it has been a very build up process or style of processing and development.
So when you got served when you tasted some of those very early experimental lots, were you really surprised at what was coming out in the cup? Were you just going, whoa, what have we got here in front of us?
Yes, but it was also very inconsistent at the beginning, and I think that now the way it's done with the equipment, with standardization, with measurement, with controlled environments, has really taken the coffees to that level and that precision where I think competitors or very high end roasters really regard the coffees as valuable, unique, and they want to have these coffees consistently.
Yep.
Back in the early days, the result was quite inconsistent. So you would get some amazing cups that really blew your mind. But then the next round or the next batch would have some, earthiness or some, just unclean aspects in the cup that would, kind of get you concerned because the replicability or the consistency was really the goal. So it was kind of a parallel process of understanding, how the complexity was there and how you were getting that complexity. And then, side by side thinking and experimenting as well on how to achieve the consistency in the cups.
I kind of view it similar to like the wine world when there was like the boom of natural wines. And I remember like early on, I was drinking some shocking wines that were just like awful.
But I meant to like this, right?
Yeah. But I feel like over time, kind of like with all this processing, it's becoming more refined, more scientific, more controlled. And we're getting those like, even though we're getting wild flavors, there can be more subtleness, more nuance to the cup rather than just kind of hitting you in the face with like, a funk bomb. And I was going to ask the same question kind of before when you were talking about the processing. Is there one coffee in your mind that just kind of stands out that either blew you away in a good or a bad way or unexpected? Is there something that kind of stands out to you as like a individual coffee?
We've struck gold.
Well, no, I think that initially, again, back in the Anthony Douglas days when Anthony was winning the nationals and then taking these coffees to the world stage, I think that at that point, I think the one coffee that kind of really stood out was Ombligón. Nestlé was just really like, oh my God, this is a statement. So at that point in time, I think Ombligón made a huge impact, and it really created a lot of talk, a lot of discussion, and a lot of buzz. So I think if I had to pick one coffee in all this process of us working together with this team of profile developers and producers, I would pick Ombligón.
Well, there you go, because that's the one that knocked my socks off as well. So we're on the same page there. Now, when I'm brewing your coffees at home, it's kind of like this new world of flavors that you're diving into. But I guess if you're kind of like, you don't understand, where do those flavors actually come from when we're looking at like processing versus the beans? How do you as a team go about, in practical terms, creating a new flavor profile?
So, in practical terms, I'm trying not to complicate this with too technical of a conversation or terminology. But basically, in practical terms, you understand what the genetic predisposition of the variety will yield, very much like wine. So you know that, in white wines, a Chardonnay is going to predispose you, if you do the right processing, to a very, buttery and mineral profile in a white wine. Or in a red wine, again, if you select a Merlot or a Cab, it's going to give you a very specific profile. That's the genetic predisposition of that grape is going to give you that if you do the process, in a controlled way, and you're targeting that profile. You're targeting the best expression possible of that variety. And in coffee is exactly the same. So I think what these guys really understood was what was the potential, the genetic potential of each variety, and then design the process so that you would get the best result possible. So if you're talking about a floral coffee, how do you develop or design the profile so that you get the most floral out of that variety. Or if it's red fruits like the Obligón or the Java you're drinking, then what is the process that you do? How do you adjust the different stages of processing so that you get the most out of the profile? Or if it's yellow, or stone fruits, how do you do that profile? And I think that's really the magic, is they understood terroir as defined as a combination of a set of aspects that are involved in that terroir. Not only, of course, soil, not only altitude, not only the geographic location of the farm, the natural surroundings, what trees, native trees you have, that is going to give you that composition of the microorganisms present in the farm. But what is the genetics of the variety? And then how do those microorganisms present in the surrounding of the farm and the cherry itself are going to work to process and to create these alcohols, acids, esters that are going to be behind the volatile components that we perceive in aroma, in fragrance, or fragrance first, aroma, and then in the taste profile.
So you would say that your processing, rather than kind of adding a new flavor profile, is more like steroids for the already existing, flavors in the coffee?
Absolutely. It's understanding the variety and then thinking what is the ideal processing method, style, stages, to what extent each stage, in what conditions each of those phases you're going to craft this processing style so that you get the most expressive result. So until now, we've been really focusing on getting those, that bomb, that really maximum potential of fruitiness or, intensity in the profile. Now we are going towards, okay, how do you tone down what you want to tone down and really create certain profiles that are better suited for different applications, whether it's an espresso or whether it's a brew. So we're now working backwards in adjusting how do you tone down what you want to tone down, which is absolutely possible.
That's cool. So I guess just to give people a sense, some of our listeners probably haven't had a chance to taste some of these kinds of coffees, but you should definitely go out and find some if you can. But we're talking about flavors here that are kind of in a realm, as we've talked about, a bit outside of the normal, right? So we've got incredibly vibrant tropical characteristics, guava, rose, very florals, a lot of fruits. This is just in one coffee. A lot of beautiful milk chocolate texture and tactile. Like the body in these coffees and the mouthfeel is incredible. But there's, a lot of very tropical, very kind of red fruit characters coming out of these. But, how you get to those. So you start with the variety and you understand deeply what that has a predisposition towards. But then what would be the next steps? Let's say you're approaching a new variety. One of the farms that you work with has it. What would be kind of the next steps that you take towards crafting? Like, do you have 3 different methods that are your standard recipes and you see what that delivers? Are you trying a washed, an anaerobic process? How would you kind of start that journey?
So when we find a new variety, it's still a lot of testing and it's still a lot of trial and error. So you to understand what the genetic predisposition of the variety is, you need to test and you need to do different processing batches or batches with different processing styles. Then dry it, stabilize it, roast it, do different development curves. Then you try it in a brewing method, or you try it, in espresso with a milk beverage. And this is interesting, Ben, because only until recently, and it has been as a result of us interacting with WBC finalist level of competitors and baristas, that we've really understood how important it is for us to test our coffees in other methods. Until very recently in Colombia, people were just doing a standard cupping session at a lab with all the protocols and in a very professional manner. But that only gives you a very limited scope of what the coffee's potential is and how you should process the coffee. And it has been until very recently that we've really gotten ourselves as a company involved in really, extracting our coffees in different methods and getting into it. So 5 months ago, as recent as that, we just only opened here in Bogota a coffee bar, which is a competition coffee bar serving and showcasing our coffees, and then hiring competitor level baristas in Colombia to come and serve at the bar. And that has really opened our eyes tremendously to better understanding our coffee. So until that, we were just only brewing. In Colombia, there is not a very deep espresso culture. So I would have to say that testing for espressos is quite hard because there's not a lot of people that are knowledgeable and experimented enough in really proper espresso extraction, like I see it, with Anthony Douglas' team, or now, Jack Simpson's team and Matt Crowley and these sort of professionals that have taken, the bar so high that really it's an amazing level. So for us as a company, interacting with these teams have helped us understand what we need to do in terms of testing our coffees, trying our coffees, and understanding what else we do with profiles. So before these last two WBCs, we were just basically brewing or cupping in a cupping table, and really understanding how floral oriented this profile is, or how fruity it is, and then from there defining or deciding, okay, if it's very floral, we're not going to do a lot of oxidation or aerobic fermentation, because we're going to kill all these floral notes that are in the profile. So we're going to limit that stage, or basically eliminate that stage, and then concentrate on just maybe a submerged fermentation. So that we work on the texture, the tactile aspect of the profile. Or if it's a very fruity coffee like the Obligón or the Java, then we're going to go all out in that initial stage of aerobic fermentation and prolong it to the limit, take it to the very limit to get all of that power and expression, and then do a very prolonged anaerobic fermentation stage, and then a very prolonged submerged anaerobic fermentation stage. And then that really creates that complexity in the profile, which is very multidimensional. It's not only the fruitiness, it's not only the power, but it's a very well-balanced acidity with the sweetness, and then it has character, and the aftertaste is clean, and then all of a sudden you get this very complex profile. So it has been, again, working on layers, and we keep working. For us, every single day we're trying to take our level higher and higher to really develop, coffees that continue to be attractive and of interest to not only competitors, but the community of roasters, coffee shops that are out there looking for sophisticated coffees to serve to consumers.
There was actually that amazing kind of experiment we did when we were over in Milan, where we did a cupping, and it was the same coffee in 5 ways, but each one had a different level of processing or kind of added to it. Yeah. And so you could kind of taste each step and how it evolved. And to your point, evolved what was already in the coffee and emphasized and did all those things. That was a really cool way to actually see the controlled precision that was being applied.
And it was cool because I remember we did this on your booth there, Juan, and I think it was the whoosh whoosh variety that we were tasting.
Yeah.
So
great name.
Yeah. I mean, it's a variety name.
Whoosh, whoosh.
Yes, perfect marketing right there. But so the first one was just a standard, classic kind of expected washed profile. And then we tasted, the second sample was another layer of processing added on top to the same washed profile. And then another layer and another layer. And what I kind of thought was very interesting was that you, after tasting all of these, you pointed out that your favorite wasn't necessarily the end of that journey where everything had been layered on top. You said, yes, that this is powerful and impactful, but actually we love the elegance and the refinement of these ones a couple of steps back. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think it happened basically with I would say the majority, if not all the people that did that sensory journey that we prepared for our appearance in Milan, which we did it, or we thought of it in wanting to present a very educational experience so that people would understand what's happening in terms of profile development in each of the stages of processing. But the result was that we got a lot of feedback of people saying, actually, I kind of like, sample number 3 or 4, and it was not really the 5th cup that had all the process. And so again, to the point is we continue to evolve in profile development, in understanding market preferences and the ideal process for each variety. So the whoosh whoosh And the geisha that we took, which are very floral, it happened that most people liked cup number 3 out of the 5 cups that we had prepared. And cup number 3 in the whoosh whoosh, had only oxidation and anaerobic fermentation. In the geisha, it had oxidation, a very short oxidation or aerobic fermentation. And then it jumped to the submerged anaerobic fermentation. And that added that texture and tactile, refined, sophisticated, elegant experience to that geisha, preserving all the florals, and people love that cup. So we continue to understand, how do we adjust, how do we create these profiles for different uses, for different markets, so that we are matching expectations or exceeding expectations of people, just being surprised with profiles.
Then I had a quick question. You were talking before about the different brew methods of the coffee and how, experimenting through espresso opened your eyes. One thing that I've kind of felt with some of these coffees that is understated, I don't know if it's like this around the rest of the world, but it's kind of like your milk-based coffees are just going to be classic kind of chocolatey blends or whatever that's there. And all the single origin, more exotic, interesting coffees are you can only drink them black, and it's a crime if you mix them with milk. But I'm finding that I feel like a lot of these more experimental processed coffees are maybe even better with milk. That these like intense flavors and texture and body like creates this milk beverage that's like nothing else and incredible. And I feel like that's an area that a lot of cafes around the world are missing. And there's a huge opportunity to open up a new world of milk-based drinks.
Massive. Yeah, I agree.
No, I love that comment. And again, it's been 5 months that we are a green coffee exporter focused on specialty, very high-end coffees. So for us, opening a competition coffee bar at our office in Bogota was not a natural thing to do. It's my first experience opening something to the public. And obviously we had our concerns, how good it was going to be for us in terms of matching our model, et cetera. But it's been amazing. It's been an incredible experience, how much we are learning every single day. I spend a lot of time weekly on my coffee bar just learning on the coffees. And to your point, obviously what I've been able to learn from competitors like Mikhail Jasin, who really dedicated a lot of time to us, Jack Simpson, Daniela Ricci, all these, very top-end competitors that have spent time with us and have really opened up to teach us, but specifically to milk, preparing milk, texturizing milk. So we've obviously brought some of this know-how to our coffee bar, and people here in Bogota are absolutely blown away. They're like, I've never had a macchiato or a flat white or a cappuccino with this texture, with this balance of fruitiness and the milk ever here in Colombia. I mean, how do you do this? And obviously, again, it's just a learning curve for us. But I completely agree with you. I think that obviously, and obviously, Ben has had the privilege of tasting all these wonderful milk beverages on the competition scene. But average consumers don't have that possibility. So I think that there's clearly an opportunity worldwide to really serve these coffees, because I think consumers would absolutely embrace them in most markets around the world.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about coffee producing for a second. So I think a lot of the time now when people think of coffee production, they're still thinking of like old school people in the farm, picking the beans, the old school production methods and all that. But a lot of these production partners that you work with actually seem pretty like high tech and advanced. Do you think the identity of coffee producers is changing around the world at the moment?
Yes, and I'm going to concentrate on commenting on Colombia. So in Colombia, you have some of these producers that are, I'm sorry to use very blunt language, but they're well off. They're well off families. They have tradition. They have resources, and they've set up wonderful farms. And it's not that hard for them because they have the resources, they have the education, they have the background. And, they go about establishing, high-end farms. So you have a group of those farms that are doing amazing things. I won't get into names, but we know who they are. But then you have a group of, traditional farmers and farmer families that have really just innovated on their own and looked for ways to process coffees and experiment. And at our company, we basically partner with just this style of producers because we feel what we bring along is the complement, is really, taking these coffees to the international scene, to the competition scene, refining the language, the presentation, the packaging, the marketing, the sales, the information that goes along so that coffees are at the level of any top end producer around the world. And that's really what we've, brought to Nestor Lasso, to Joan Vergara, and to Jonathan Gasca, is that complement. And that's why we decided mutually to say, okay, these competition coffees are something that we're going to work on exclusively, mutually exclusive. They only work with Lohas Beans, these competition coffees, and we only work these coffees with them because we feel that it's not hard. Like you said it, it's something that doesn't happen overnight. It's really centered around, people and knowledge and spending the time and really developing, the knowledge. So I think, yes, in Colombia, definitely you see, and it's not only, these three producers that I've mentioned or these three farms, you see other farms that are, walking the same path. By the way, these guys are very open. They always share knowledge. They embrace other producers from the region to come into the farms to learn, to understand the techniques. There's really not any jealousy or any, apprehensiveness in terms of not allowing other producers to learn and to incorporate some of these techniques and do well as well. So yes, there's definitely a huge change in Colombia in terms of not seeing producers anymore as these neglected small scale farmers that have no access to markets, that have no understanding of markets, that have no education. You've seen us travel around the world with all these producers, and now they understand. They understand perfectly well, how markets behave, the differences, the cultural differences in Asia, in Europe, in Australia, in the US, in different markets, how markets behave. And it's really opened their minds tremendously. And obviously it creates a lot of value in what we do because from that understanding, we're much more synchronized and we can approach customers and coffee development in a much more, directed way. So definitely, yes, there's a huge change and in a good sense, I think, because obviously, you see this progress permeating in a larger and growing number of producers in Colombia.
I mean, it's interesting. I think it's important for us to point out that obviously, this crew of producers is doing an incredible job, but they are a very, very small niche of the global coffee market and even of the specialty coffee market globally in all these different countries. But obviously they represent what could happen and kind of a pathway that isn't necessarily, as Juan is saying, isn't just about being the most resourced and having a lot of money available. You can make use of these other practices. That changing identity for the producer one, how important do you think that is actually for the future of specialty coffee? That producers can see that, pursue that as this is maybe a more celebrated profession and position to be doing business in, and B is something that can be very successful from kind of putting in that work and refining their product.
So first point, yes, I agree. I think that it's still a very, very tiny minority of the total global group of coffee producers, of at least specialty, that really reach or are able to achieve this level of refinement, sophistication, and success. But I think going back to that example of the wine industry, it's very similar to wine. I mean, you don't get these very well-known, famous wine producers randomly or easily either. I mean, it's only a selected group of wineries that achieve that level of sophistication and that level of success in terms of positioning and value for their product. And it's happening the same in coffee. So I think that the techniques are there, the knowledge, but it's a combination of factors. And that's why these guys, when I was mentioning before that they're not very jealous about opening their farms, I think it's great because I quite frankly think that it's almost impossible to replicate Nestor Lasso's Ombligón, going back to that example, or to Joan Vergara's Java, or to Tatan's Papayo. Why? Because it's a combination of factors of where the farm is located, the genetics of the variety, the terroir and all of that, surrounding environmental conditions in the farm. Then the processing techniques, how standardized, measured it is or not. So I think that it's virtually impossible to go, as it would be in wine, to go and replicate, a famous winery product or wine, Opus One in Napa or any of the Saint-Emilion famous, Grand Cru, Classé wines in France. So it's the same. So I think that, yes, in coffee, we're in the very early stages of seeing these, trend to talking about specific varietals and understanding which are the right, and that's going to be our next focus, which is categorizing the varietals by the profile. Which are those varietals, so that people start understanding. Because obviously, when I say Chiroso or I say, Ombligón or I say Ají, people are like, is that coffee? I mean, what is that? So I think we need to do a lot of educational work in categorizing these varietals, which are the red fruits, which are the stone fruits in the fruity profile, which are the tropical prone varietals, which are the florals. How do you suggest to use them? Giving roasting curves, suggested roasting curves, so that people understand how to roast these coffees. I think that, and that's why I refer to this as we are in the very early stages of really approaching coffee in this very systematic, educational way, so that a consumer that is fond of understanding and learning about specialty coffee has a very clear, guidebook of how to select the coffee that you want to buy. So I think, it's still niche, still in the early stages, but I think a very clear path in terms of what's to come.
It's awesome. I mean, it all ties in because when we're out there buying coffee in procurement, when you're a coffee roaster and you're sourcing out coffee, we should be talking consistently about how to get producers more and more of the value, the final value in that. And historically, I think that's come about, or it's emerged from the recognition of particular regions, right? So there's been added value, kind of recognizing this is from Huila, from Yirgacheffe, from Boquete in Panama, from Sumatra, right? And then further on to that was kind of the recognition of some of the varieties like Geisha, Pink Bourbon, Pacamara. But, those aren't accessible to a lot of people around the world. Maybe producers can't pick and choose like the perfect variety or just transplant to a famous region, right? So Juan, do you see that coffee processing and I guess fermentation in particular can kind of help producers create and capture more of the value, even without any access to like rare genetics?
Yes, definitely yes. I think that even if you're located in any area of Huila or Antioquia, the more traditional, Colombian coffee producing regions, and you have a farm and you do processing with very limited investment in terms of tools, but you understand what you're doing and you approach it in a structured, systematic, replicable, measured way, and you're diligent about that and you're committed and you're serious. I think, yes, definitely any coffee, regardless of the genetics, the location, can be improved and can be directed towards the potential of that variety in a specific processing style, and can definitely help bring value. So that's one thing I love, and having just completed my CVA, course, I think that's one fantastic thing about the new protocols, which is really understanding how, with the identification of these traits and these characteristics in the coffee, you create value. And obviously, with processing, you can improve, the characteristics of coffee and the assessment of the descriptors of coffee to improve and increment the value of the coffee. So yes, definitely, I do think that in this process that I describe in my own view, my own personal view, as we are being in the early stages of this broad and understanding these new processing methods, most any producers can benefit from it and can find value and add value to their product. Definitely, yes, I agree.
Also, just jumping back to you talking about, is it Yirgacheffe?
Look, I'm probably mispronouncing that terribly.
No, I mean, you're probably right.
Yirgacheffe.
I don't know. I've just always said Yirgacheffe. Like I've just gone Yirgacheffe. And now it's just one of those things. I've probably said that for 20 years. Do you know, how is it pronounced?
Yeah, how would one pronounce it?
I would pronounce it like you pronounce it, Ron. I would say Yirgacheffe.
Okay. No, but I reckon you're probably, I mean, you've
Maybe
been
I
around.
just put a little terrible accent
He's
on
going
the end.
French with it.
Yogurt chef.
We need to find that out. I'm going to dive into that after
need
this.
some.
Now, there's a lot of debate in the coffee industry at the moment around infused coffees, about infusing coffees with fruits, with mango, with coconut. Where do you personally draw the line in the sand for what is authentic and what is fake?
Okay, so I think everything's allowed as long as the information is out there and people know what they're buying, and you disclose what you're doing. So I think everything's allowed. Personally, at Lohas, we have not really been very fond of infused coffees or co-fermented coffees. We've never really traded them. We've never really sold them. So
Can I quickly interrupt you there, Juan? Can you explain for everyone listening, what are we even talking about though? Like what is infused coffee and what's co-fermented versus what you just normally do?
Perfect. So our understanding, because it is all still debatable and it's in the process of being, written and officially published as, official standards and guidelines and definitions. But from our understanding, we talk about infused coffees when you are adding a particular element, a additive substance flavoring that has been artificially processed, and you add this during the stages of fermentation.
Yeah.
So basically, you're wanting your coffee during the fermentation to be absorbing some of these flavors, artificial flavors. And that is our understanding of infusion or infused coffee. So whether you're adding a peach flavor or a watermelon flavor or mango flavor, you're adding this artificially processed powder-like or liquid-like additive and flavoring to the fermentation tank or whatever fermentation device you're using or tool you're using. Co-fermented would be you're co-fermented with something else, whether you're putting a fruit, pineapple or mango or any other fruit, and you're adding something in the fermentation tank again to bring maybe other microorganisms that are present in that fruit, and to create a co-fermentation of different types of microorganisms that are not only present in the coffee cherry. And that's the trick to what we do. So basically, we only stick to microorganisms that are present in the coffee cherry. We've done some exceptions to order. For example, we did with Mikhail Jasin a fermentation experiment where we brought some luwak yeast that Mikhail gave to us from Indonesia, and we did specific batches made to ordered using that luwak yeast, and we made a batch with Ombligon. And recently with Daniele Ricci, he wanted to experiment for the WBC with a yeast from Franciacorta in Italy, a specific winery in northern part of Italy. And we brought the yeast from Franciacorta. It's called Vita, and we did this Vita development with Chiroso because he wanted to see if we could get some of that sparkliness in the profile, and actually we were able to achieve that. So we've done some specific batches using inoculated yeasts, but the main offering in our list is basically focusing on coffees that are only processed with the microorganisms present in the coffee cherry, that we basically concentrate them through what we refer to as the mosto, which is basically coffee cherries, water, and we add sugar to the water as a feeding mechanism to the microorganisms. That sugar, it will obviously not be ever absorbed by the coffee bean, but it's just there to serve as food or energy, an energy source to the microorganisms doing the work of decomposing the sugar chains present in the mucilage and the coffee bean. So basically, the big line, the difference line, not ethical and not in a way of discrimination in our personal view, is just clarification and giving that transparency to what we do. Is we are focusing on all our competition coffees on working with the microorganisms and the yeast present in the coffee cherry of each variety. We actually even avoid combining microorganisms from varietals. So we don't use this mosto from, let's say, a geisha from Johan's farm to ferment the whoosh whoosh from Tatan. No, we stick to the microorganisms present in each variety and each farm.
You actually sent me a text before we chatted that kind of like ties into that. Do you have that question locked and loaded?
Yeah, it was kind of, I guess there's a question and wondering of, that is the future of kind of distinctive coffees going to be less about the variety and maybe about a specific strain of yeast or a processing protocol?
Well, specifically, like geisha, right, was like the thing that flipped the coffee world on its head. Like when people first started looking at those Panama geishas and those floral coffees that were like so incredible, that became the thing that everyone was like, had to talk about geisha.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is like, is that going to flip in the next thing? Are we going to be talking about a yeast strain instead?
The famous yeast strains. It's kind of not quite as sexy, but, very influential. What do you think, Juan?
I don't think it's going to be very marketable to say I have the latest Saccharomyces that's going to blow your mind. So I don't think that's going to do it in terms of marketing. No, I would tend to think that it's going to be varietals and regions, and then understanding, mapping, and communicating which are the predominant yeasts, and then educating a little bit. And I know this is, like we don't really ever ask, that delicious white, wine or red wine that we love from a specific region around the world, whether it's Australia or any other place. So what, yeast strain did you use to ferment this wine? We don't really get into that. We never ask that question, but and I think that's not really going to happen in coffee either. But I think it's going to be understanding better which varietals, at least that's our approach, is which varietals are prone to these floral or fruity notes, etc., and then trying to give a basic understanding and education on the profile. What do you expect? So that people can really start identifying themselves in not only Colombia, but hopefully, many countries, coffee producing countries. What's that specific coffee that I enjoy the most with a specific method? And then if you can start matching, your preferences with different times of the day or settings, whether it's, a dinner party or it's or your first coffee in the day, or what is it that you like and how you like it. So I think if you start really building that culture, coffee drinking culture among, specialty coffee, interested consumers, I think that's really, we have a lot to do in terms of going deep in carving a space for specialty coffee in that segment of the market. So I believe that is still understanding varietals, understanding profiles. And again, I think I'm very, very impressed with how this new CVA approach to, profiling and describing coffee profiles, and then giving that, more effective feedback or description of if you like the coffee or not, if you think the coffee matches a specific market preference or not. I think it's very well thought out because it's, there's a very subjective, and then there's a very objective. So the objective being obviously the descriptive part, and the subjective being whether you like it or not. And I think that's really, it creates a very good avenue to continue to develop in terms of how you match consumers' interests and preferences.
I love that. And I love that answer because I think it really keeps coming back to the core of what specialty coffee emerged out of is the people and the place. That where the coffee is grown and what the choices are that the people who produce it still has a really steering factor. I think it would be a sad day if suddenly all the coffee tasted the same if it used the same yeast strain.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
And one, we know aside from kind of this processing side of things and the varieties, we know that coffee farming is really freaking hard, and there's climate challenges all over the world that coffee producers are really struggling with, unpredictable flowering, changing temperatures, lots of disease pressure can come in, coffee leaf rust and so on. It kind of feels like processing might be one of the few tools that a producer can really control, that they can actually manage. Are you seeing kind of ways for processing to be a tool that producers can use to manage climate change?
Difficult. I don't. And you do see, obviously a growing threat. So you can take actions to try to mitigate and to offset some of the, recent phenomena that have occurred, whether it's excess, rainy seasons or excess dry seasons and droughts. But I don't think that processing really is an answer or a potential, a tool to mitigate or to offset some of these risk factors that are present and that are very real. So no, I think processing is definitely not there. I do think that obviously, as much as producers in general and the specific ones that we partner with can continue to do in terms of more shade trees planted in the farms to retain moisture and to improve soil conditions, adherence and stability, among others. I think those are all actions that need to be taken. But no, I don't think processing really plays a role in that aspect.
Now, Juan, I'm not a scientist. I don't know if you know that, but I just had a question with looking at like all the processing that you're doing and like microbiology and all these things. Does it have to be done just on like a smaller scale or a niche scale, or can it be scaled? Like it feels like it'd be very difficult to do this on a giant level to control all of those variabilities.
So the good thing is it can be scaled, and I think Joan Vergara, in particular, among the three farms and producers that we've decided to partner with, is a great example. So Joan just finished this year. He inaugurated a processing facility. The name is Peñas Blancas, and it's inside the farm. It's inside Las Flores. But Peñas Blancas, reason for existence and for establishment was to really buy cherry from neighboring farms, scale up production, have a more competitive price to some of these varietals, while still transferring a better price to the producers, the neighboring producers, and transferring knowledge to these producers. So Joan invites these producers that he's buying the cherries from, all our varietals, and he brings them in and teaches them how the process is done and how he's creating value for their coffee cherries. And I think it's a great example, and he's been able to scale. So now, again, we're not talking about dozens of containers of any of these varietals, but we're definitely talking about hundreds of tons of any of these coffees. And in some of these cases, we're now in the thousands of tons of these varietals. So, yes, now we take orders of, at least 5-6 tons of any of these specific processes. We're not talking about the competition coffees. I think the competition's coffees do have a limit and do have a cap. But then again, we never expected nor targeted really, going into the tons and tons of scale up in the competition coffees. But in what we have labeled as the green label, which is our washed microlots, and our red labeled coffees, which are our natural processed microlots, all of them have really scaled up. So we do that with John. I think he's the one that has really been able to take this to a very interesting scale. But then Adriana and Nestor Lasso have followed through, and they've also expanded a facility. The name is La Planta, also within El Diviso. And La Planta is also operating in the same way, buying cherries from neighboring farms, scaling up the processing and the availability of all these varietals. And I think Sarsa will come very soon with its own version. And I think this is another very interesting thing, that they all share knowledge, they all share information, experiences. We all work as a team, but it's amazing to see how there is a very distinctive identity, processing style, and profile development in El Diviso, in Las Flores, and in Sarsa, in all the coffees that they craft and they produce for Lohas Beans. So for me, it's really rewarding to see how, as a team, we are very articulated. We come together to build a strategy, to develop the profiles, but then each one has a very distinctive way of processing the coffees, and the results are obviously very different in terms of profiles.
Raining fruit.
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. And that's wild that you're talking thousands of tons being able to go through. That's insane.
It's cool what people can access.
That's going to open up a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, Juan, we're going to look into our crystal ball of the future for a moment. I want you to search forward. So let's think 5 years from now. Okay. I'm brewing some coffee. Is it tasting like things I've never imagined? Or do you think people are going to start reining back and going for something a little bit more simple?
Like the flavor wheel. I think that we're going to have this very complex range of flavors, and what we're going to keep finding is new varietals. I think that we will continue to find and to have these varietals pop up, and therefore continue to expand that range of flavors that we find. But I believe that we're going to be standardizing some of these processing methods, and I think that we're going to be able to direct the different profiles towards preferences, whether it's extraction methods or uses, and then really have a much more educated and calibrated conversation with markets and customers on what we want, what really sells better in our market, what our customers are really enjoying, and then really having a much more accurate match of what we're selling, what we're offering, and what markets really want. So I think that's really how I see 5 years down the road, a much more evolved conversation, a much more educated conversation. I think that customers are not going to be coming to origin trips really to kind of validate whether this is really a fermented coffee or is it really an infused, and it's not going to be that kind of critical, skeptical eye, but it's going to be much more an educated customer that comes engaging in that conversation of what is it really, it's working in my market that my customers want and that I really want to scale up and trade more of because it's working really well. So I think, that's kind of what I foresee is going to probably happen in the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Well, I got to tell you what, that leads perfectly into our next segment, which is Extra Hot Take with 2 Sugars.
Looking forward to this one.
2 Sugars. I mean, that just leads me in perfectly. I'm going to kick off because it was right there. We see the world's best baristas and champions using these experimental processing methods and fermentations in their routines, but I don't think that specialty coffee is actually where it's going to end up. I think there's a bigger opportunity in the mass markets. I'm talking the Luckens, I'm talking the Starbuckses. Ooh. I'm talking about the future of these markets where you can have coffees that have all these wild, crazy flavors, fruit, tropical. Think about adding that into signature drinks, into mocktails, into iced beverages, where you're adding the flavor through coffee, not through all these additional additive things and syrups. So I think the future is actually going to be more of a mass market thing than the specialty market.
Oh, I love it. That's such a cool take.
Juan, thoughts? Yes,
Absolutely. No? No, I can't agree more, Ron. I think that, yes, we are definitely beyond the syrups and the flavorings and the sugar and adding all these things to a strong base of a dark, concentrated, sometimes bitter drink that we have to work around to make it attractive and so that we sell more into really, this huge, and again, going back to the example of wine, that huge variety and of range of flavors that you can choose from if you're a wine lover, or a sake drinker, or a gin drinker, or any other spirit that you have an array of flavors and a huge variety to choose from. So I completely agree. I think that the challenge for all these huge coffee chains, and I have this conversation all the time in Japan with traditional coffee shop chains that have a really hard time making that shift and really going beyond that traditional beverage they design and they've worked on and that they feel it's working. But no, I think consumers are more educated. I think consumers really want a real coffee experience, and they want the flavors and they want the sweetness coming from the coffee and the combination of the coffee with the milk, as we were talking before, and not really from other added flavors. So I completely agree with your take. I think that the future is in massification. And I think the companies that are leading, in terms of volumes, whether it's coffee shop chains or whether it's traders, I think they all need to, look at themselves in the mirror and say, okay, how are we going to make this transition? And it's not easy at all, but I think it's definitely where the industry is going. So I completely agree with you.
So, Juan, do you have a hot take of your own that you'd like to share with everyone?
Yeah, it's for my own country. I think that our own coffee federation needs to shake up and understand where the industry is and, manage the complexity of the bureaucracy, the complexity of the mindset, the complexity of the weight on the shoulders of the tradition and the history, and understand that we need to shake things up and we need to, really have a sector come together as a sector, all of the industry, and really understand how we can collaborate and how we can work to really take the specialty coffee sector of Colombia to a next level that really permeates and benefits a lot of people, producers, and of course, a lot of the industry out there in different markets, that they see a coffee sector of Colombia that is modern, innovative, open to changes, in tune with what's coming ahead. So yeah, I think that's my hot take.
Love it. FNC, dial in and pay attention. We'll just send them the
and
episode.
I have this conversation with Herman all the time. So this is not something that I'm shooting from the back, but it's upfront and it's friendly and it's really a call to collaborate.
Yeah. I love that. And it's, I'm sure it is challenging. Again, as we said, these are the small drops in the ocean of what's happening in a huge coffee market, but they can be real innovation kind of sparks to get out there. I love it. Nice.
Now, Ben, you're a hot take yourself, but did you come prepared with a hot take?
Well, I did, but I feel like I'm kind of copying your hot take, or at least it's a variation on your
did
approach.
we? Oh, I'm sorry.
I think we met here.
No wonder you were agreeing so much when I was saying it. You're like, yeah.
Yeah, good point.
This is why we need to, talk before the pods there. We're just coming with the exact same thing. But hit us with your variation,
All right. My hot take is that every cafe should be adding onto their menu alongside the mocha, or maybe if they're keeping the syrups, they're keeping the little hazelnut latte, add in a processed coffee, a higher processed coffee. That could be infused, co-fermented, whichever way you want to go, but add it onto the menu. I think one thing that you're going to be introducing people who are excited about flavors and kind of complex things. So a lot of the younger generation is going for exciting different flavors and wanting to try stuff. It's a great entry-level coffee, for people who are like, oh, I don't like coffee, or I'm new to coffee and it's bitter and burnt. Serve them up something like we just drank and they'll be like, what? This is available?
Why not? Just to have a coffee on there and just say, hey, this tastes like strawberries in your milk. And people are like, okay, weird.
Sure.
All right, I'll try
and then
it.
they're like, wow, it's there.
And you don't have to really change that much. It's not hard. It's just like having a different single origin on your menu or a decaf on your menu, Yeah.
I think you got to kind of position it differently. Like you should put it on the menu saying this is not, because normally in a lot of Australian cafes, it'll be, there's a flat white, a long black, an espresso, a latte, it's the beverage types, and then there'll be like single origins. But I think almost put it in as like kind of a signature drink style, like where you would have a mocha or a particular seasonal beverage. Give it a name. Maybe it's like the Hydro Honey Deluxe, and then serve that out, and it'll position people's minds to be trying something new.
Oh, wait. And now we just tapped into something completely different that we talked about at the start, that Hydro Honey.
Yeah, we've been drinking this. One, you can tell us a little bit about the coffee we've been drinking here. This is a delicious little bag of beans that you gave me to take back from Milan at WBC. It's the Java variety Duo Cherry Velvet Hydro Honey. Can you unpack that label for us?
Yes, great. Thank you. Applause to that. I completely agree. Every coffee shop should have one of these, new processed coffees so that people try them and they get feedback if they like them or not. Completely agree. Applause to that. The Java Duo Cherry Velvet. So the Duo Cherry Velvet is the category that we created at Lohas Beans for this coffee. Hydro Honey is the term that Johan Vergara from Finca Las Flores uses to refer to this coffee. A Java variety, so this is Finca Las Flores, Huila, in Acevedo, Huila. A processor producer is Joan Vergara, his brother Diego Vergara. And basically they went and they studied how in Costa Rica, a similar process, but not the same, was done. And in Costa Rica, they refer to this process as Hydro Honey. So the version that Johan does is not the same as the Costa Rica style, which is basically half drying a natural processed coffee, in this case the Java. And when I say to half drying is to take it to around 16% moisture level, then let it rest, then re-soak it in water, rehydrate it to depulp it. That is the traditional Costa Rican way. What Johan, invented, envisioned, and did it is he basically combined that same process of drying, stabilizing, rehydrating, but then he brought in fresh cherries from the same variety, freshly harvested cherries, and he depulped together the fresh cherries with the re-soaked half natural dried cherries. His thought process was, I'm going to bring the brilliance and a little bit of the acidity of the fresh cherries, the viscosity from the mucilage to help me depulp the re-soaked natural cherries that give me the body, the structure, and the fruitiness. And he envisioned that he was going to create this very structured, complex profile, and he did it. And that is the version of Las Flores Java Hydro Honey, which we call Duo Cherry Velvet, trying to explain and then conveying all the information to consumers. In the Duo Cherries, you're using two types of cherries, the freshly harvested cherries and the half natural re-soaked cherries.
But this is, okay, so this is where I'm talking about these experimental processing methods where there's a finesse and a purpose behind them, because my brother-in-law is a winemaker and he has a Fiano, and like often you'll get a Fiano and it's got a very specific take. It's an Italian varietal. But he was like, what we've done to balance this Fiano is the same grape has been processed 3 completely different ways. One to add brightness and acidity, one where it's on the skin, so we're going to add texture, one where it's like this. And so this is the exact same thing here where we're getting a great taste out of this like hydro honey, but we need to add a bit more acidity, a bit more liveliness back in. Yep. And so we're starting to blend and be purposeful and create a specific drink. That is so cool. And I'm so glad that I stopped and asked to ask about the hydro honey.
Ron, that's why we're in the very early stages of fine, refined, sophisticated coffee processing. This is just, we're in I don't know, the first 5% of the road. We have a long way to go. But it's exactly what you're saying. It's how you create these profiles, is thinking, how do I add that additional thing that I'm lacking in the cup, in the structure? You're exactly right.
And in the cup, as I think we were saying at the beginning, it tastes like Fry's Turkish Delight, which is a particular brand of Australian chocolate candy of like Turkish Delight in the center, milk chocolate out on the outside, but an even better version. Yeah. It's like, this is so delicious. Someone needs to be, I don't know, making this into a gel and like creating it as a dessert item. Maybe we should
turn it into a Turkish Delight.
Oh, done. It's happening.
Well, go ahead. No.
Look, we've got one last segment in the podcast one that we'd love to get your input on. This is a little industry shout out space and just an opportunity if there's someone out there in the coffee world or maybe not in the coffee world who you think is doing an incredible job that deserves a little bit more light shone on them. Is there anyone you want to shout out to?
Well, he definitely has a lot of spotlight, but I'll still give my shout out definitely to Jack Simpson.
Yay!
Absolutely.
Yes.
I have, obviously my relationship with Mikhail Jason has been extremely close. Again, I mentioned Daniela Ricci. And we've collaborated with a number of very fine, excellence-driven baristas, from the U.S., recently Kate Chon, just so many baristas that we work closely with and that I deeply value that interaction and that collaboration. But Jack has taken this to a very personal level, just the way in which he engaged his relationship with Tatan, with Jonathan Gasca from Sarsa, with Alejandra. His wife has just been, extremely touching, very personal, very purpose-driven. He really wanted to bring this coffee to the world stage and to show the coffee and to, make that connection beyond just the talk, beyond just saying, I'm connecting with producers or I want to bring value to producers, but just taking this to a whole new level. And that's why for all of us to be in Milan together and to have experienced, witnessed, and supported Jack's path to success and to achieving the title was extremely special. We've learned a lot from him, from his team, from Matt, obviously from all the Axel team. Definitely my shout out is to Jack Simpson.
Great
shout out.
Yeah.
What a legend.
We love it. Well, look, Juan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been so great to just understand the journey you've been on and maybe where the journey of processing will continue to go. And after tasting these kinds of coffees, this is all not all just theory and all talk. The refinement and the elegance in the cup is pretty astounding.
Also, quick question, because I'm not sure how it works in terms of accessing it, but I was kind of blown away by how affordable some of these coffees were that are like some of the best coffees I've ever tasted. And I'm like expecting this giant price tag. And don't get me wrong, it's still more expensive than, regular coffee, but it's very affordable for like the quality and level of what you're getting. Do you have to buy them like in bulk as a cafe? Could you just buy some regularly, like a kilo, or does it have to be bought in bulk?
Thank you for the comment, and it's been part of the strategy, Ron. We've wanted to keep these prices within a price point that it's obviously compensating the work and the time and the effort that is behind crafting these profiles for these guys. But definitely keep them in a price point where they're still affordable for coffee shop owners, for roasters, for consumers, because we don't want this to be these prices that are like unreasonable and obviously beyond normal people's reach. No, we want this to be still a coffee that can be enjoyed by anyone. That's still at a price point where almost anyone can buy a cup of coffee. So yeah, that's been part of the strategy that we've decided on jointly with Joan, Adrián, Nestor, and Tatan. And then, we've also, obviously we trade through very strategic partners around the world, try to make the coffees as accessible as possible. But we've also set up an online shop that it's in our website, lohasbeans.com, that anyone can log on and buy 1 kilogram of coffee of any of these coffees, green, and then just have them shipped via FedEx or DHL anywhere in the world. So, we're again trying to make this as open, accessible, and democratized as possible.
Well,
so cool.
If there's ever been a better reason at the end of an episode to be like, go to the website right now and check out some of these coffees. And we were talking about the other week, I think now with like our understanding of freezing coffees and that kind of thing, it becomes a lot more affordable because yes, if you're spending, $100 whatever on a kilo of coffee, if you can single dose those out now, put them in your fridge and just bring them out when you have a special guest over or a friend and, enjoy them over a year, it's pretty affordable for some pretty outstanding coffees. So I would go check that out. It's Lohas Beans. Yeah, treat yourself. It's the giving season coming up. So there's never been a better time than to jump on and do that. Mate, thank you so much for jumping on and sharing all of that insight with us. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share it with some friends. We've been blown away by all the support we've been getting recently of all the new listeners that are jumping on. If you're new to the pod, thank you for doing so. And even on the Instagram, I feel like the Instagram's gone up like 4,000 followers in like the last month or two, which is fantastic to see more and more people jumping on board. So make sure to share, make sure to subscribe to us. Ben actually promised that once we hit 10,000 followers on Instagram, Ben is actually going to do an exotic little dance for everyone live on the podcast. So you can.
Oh, goodness. We might lose followers at that point, but it's fine.
And then, thank you for joining us. That was great. Ben, you actually told me that you've created your own processing method at your house.
Yeah.
What's that called again?
It's Ben's bathtub.
Ben's bathtub fermentation.
It's like when I'm sitting in a bathtub full of coffee cherries.
There you go. That's
ticked off by like the FDA or any health.
I'm scared to taste that.
I've tried it and it definitely is its own yeast strain. We'll see you next week, guys. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Please make sure to follow us as well on our social media, lohasbeans.com. We're going to have a lot of educational material coming up as well. So yes, please make sure that you reach out if you have questions or if you want to find out more information. Really appreciate you guys having me on the show and on the podcast. I enjoyed it very much and look forward to staying in touch.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. See you next time, everyone.